Shalom. Shalom from Eretz Yisrael, from Nahariya, Israel, where it is Tu B'Shvat. Yes, Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah for trees. Strange, January 27th. Rosh Hashanah, the harbinger for springtime, even though in Israel with the weather, it feels more like Groundhog Day in Pixatawny, Pennsylvania. Dates can be confusing, especially when it comes to yahrzeits, anniversaries, markers, milestones. But before I come back to that point, permit me a personal privilege. Let me talk about another date in September 7th, it might have been 8th, of 1964, when I first met Moshe Segal on our first day in Mesivta, Crown Heights, and the first day that we became friends. Let me quote from the yearbook with its recollections. Freshman year. Grussgott, where are your every weeks? Segal, stop throwing spitballs. I was 5'3". He was 6 feet tall. And over the next 4 years, I managed to grow 7 more inches, while he grew another 4 inches. And as hard as I could, I and everyone else in the Mesivta Crown Heights class could never catch up in height and in stature to my friend, Moshe Segal. I was the class clown. I finally managed to find reading assignments, but he had grown to become the class commentator, convener, consigliere, comrade, and friend. He had stopped throwing spitballs after maybe the first week in school, and for the next 4 years stood literally and figuratively head and shoulders above all his classmates. As editor of our yearbook that I picked up and still treasure, as editor of our yearbook, Moshe Segal had a commitment to history, politics, sociology, in addition to Torah, as evidenced by the 2 articles that he had contributed to Crown 69, the yearbook. One brilliant and learned Devar Torah on the Gemara and the Talmud of Psachim, where Jews round the world are actually studying Daf Yomi, an article that he wrote over 50 years ago. But I'm not going to talk about that Devar Torah. Instead, I referred to another article that he wrote, being the tops in his English class. He wrote, interestingly, a synopsis of death by Moshe Segal, where he recalls witnessing tragic deaths of 2 young men. We know them as RFK and MLK, respectively, Martin Luther King, Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy, 2 leaders who had fought to better their country. But he doesn't want to talk about that, says Moshe Segal. I'd like to discuss a different death. And he discusses the death of an institution, the United Nations. He was the first to report on the United Nations death. That's 50 years before people would finally see the UN, which I guess exists in some fashion like a glass monumentally magnificent tombstone alongside the East River, he spoke of its demise, the demise of an institution not living up to its ideals, as opposed to people who pass on young, but who still live on and do not die. So let me come back to the point of anniversaries. When exactly was the UN built that Moshe Segal spoke so pointedly of and wrote so pointedly about? I don't know, and I don't care. When exactly did it die? As Moshe Segal predicted, it already had. We don't know and we don't care as far as the exact time and date. Let's talk about another anniversary. If I've been asked to speak about my friend's date of death, anniversary, February 15th, I believe, the anniversary of Moshe Segal's death. I looked it up. That date in 1798, I think Moshe would smile. 1798, on that day, February 15th, was the first fist fight in Congress ever recorded in the United States Congress. And in 1804, New Jersey, that's Moshe Segal's native home state, New Jersey became the very last northern state to finally abolish slavery. Now, these are dates that deserve to be commemorated with the same seriousness and solemnity as Groundhog's Day is observed in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania. When I talk to you on Tu B'Shvat, it might be January 27th, it's not important. I talk to you on another kind of anniversary, an anniversary we take more seriously than its inclement weather would suggest. So now I want you to take Moshe Segal's anniversary, the Yahrzeit, in a serious way, in the serious way that this moment deserves, to be commemorated and even celebrated. I want to talk to you about the Hebrew date of Moshe Segal's passing, the 4th of Adar, where Moshe Segal's Yahrzeit coincides with two other giant Jews. My father's Yahrzeit on the 4th of Adar. My father, who was 5'4", was executive director in Marine Park Jewish Center, and spoke to me very encouragingly about my new friend, Moshe Segal, because Abe Grussgott, executive director of Marine Park Jewish Center, had already known and heard about Moshe Segal's father, Rabbi Segal from Newark. Wow, this is a family that you can hang out with, Ira. You'll learn something about serving Jews and Jewish community with anyone with the name of Segal. So my father, who passed away, was 5'4". That's his Yahrzeit, the 4th of Adar. And another Jew who some of you may be familiar with, another giant, Menachem Begin, who was 5'4.5". Moshe Segal, who stood literally head and shoulders above his classmates, like my father and like Menachem Begin, just grew and grew in stature with every year of his passing. Why? Because Moshe Yonah Segal lived up to his name. As humble as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our master and mentor, of whom it is described, Vayish Moshe Anav Mikal Adam, the most humble of all. How can a great giant in stature be humble? Because, like Moshe Segal, who was pretty tall himself, but never cowered in any kind of selfish way, never exhibiting a personal kind of pressure, never exhibiting personal ego or selfish interest, even as he was committed passionately to his commitments, and as reluctant as Jonah the prophet, not seeking, indeed shying away from the spotlight, and not seeking to preach to anyone publicly, or even privately for that matter, in family circle and friends. A person who would prefer to lead by example, a person who had your back and drew you in rather than and pulled you up rather than push you in any direction. And I have here and in my file drawers the letters, the number of letters that he kept on writing me even after we parted ways after high school. How he wrote letters from Israel, encouraging me to learn in Israel. And thanks to some measure to his influence, I now live in Israel in a quiet way with those letters, which had a lot of humor as well. So I have the letters and pictures to prove it, like a Segal, like a Segal, Sagan LeKohanim, helping and aiding and supporting those who wished to dedicate their lives to the kahuna as priests, ambassadors to Jewish living. And so I know that those letters and articles and pictures, they will serve as remembrances and occasions to celebrate as a Yahrzeit for more than just one day a year, but for many, many years to come. Moshe Yonah Segal, Yehi Zichro Baruch.